Okay, so to solve for x, we start by isolating the x squared. And we get 24 on this side, negative 2x squared. And then we're going to get rid of the negative 2. Since it's negative 2 times, you divide. And we get x squared equals negative 12.
What?
You didn't get that?
Oh.
And then we need to do a factor tree for 12. Since we're doing the square root of a negative number, our answer is going to have what in it? I, right. All right, so I'm going to do square root plus or minus square root. And then I'm just going to do a factor tree for positive 12 because the negative is going to give me the I. So I have 3 times 4, and that's 2 times 2. You can do 6 and 2 also, but you'll still end up with 3 times 2 times 2, right? 3 times 2 times 2. So that would give me a 2 on the outside. Because it's negative, I have an I on the outside, and then I have a root 3, and I'm still missing what on my answer? What did I forget? I had it back here. The plus or minus here, okay? So the plus or minus is what I was missing. So when you solve an equation with a square root, you need to have a plus or a minus on it. This one, here's my square term. I have to get rid of the plus 1 and the times 3. So first minus the 1. And then divide the 3. And we have x minus 8 squared equals negative 25. So you have to get the squared part by itself, and then you're going to do a plus or minus square root. And I don't have to do a factor tree for 25 because the square root of 25 is what number?
5.
Good. And I have a negative, so it's going to be a 5i. So I have x minus 8 equals plus or minus 5i. And how do I get rid of the minus 8? Plus the 8, good. So my final answer is x equals 8 plus or minus 5i. All right, so I can solve a quadratic equation this way when my x is only a squared term. Notice I only have a squared x, I don't have any other x. Here, if I had a middle term like negative 2x squared plus 3x minus 13 equals 11, I wouldn't be able to solve it with a square root. However, you can solve any quadratic equation with a quadratic formula if it's in the format ax squared plus bx plus c. So you'd have to get everything to one side and make the other side 0. This is the formula. X equals, there's a big fraction, negative b plus or minus the square root, b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Looks like a lot, right? It looks difficult, but it's just a formula. You just substitute numbers into the formula. Let me zoom it a little bit for you so you can see better. Yes? Let's do a problem first. All right, one thing to keep in mind is that often people go astray with their quadratic formula because when you square a negative number, you have to put parentheses on that negative number. So just as a reminder, I'm going to suggest that you put parentheses around your b there. So you remember that you're going to have to square that with parentheses. All right, and then it says, note you may need to rewrite the equation in standard form. And standard form is this, the ax squared plus bx plus c. So if it doesn't have one side equal to 0, you're going to have to do that before you can get started. All right. And then this one here, this is like from a previous year. We don't use Desmos this year because we're getting ready for your next year class. So we can check your results. I can show you how to do that in a little bit, but right now we're gonna just solve problems. So notice A is in front of x squared, B is in front of x, and C has no x on it. So my A is 4, my B is 3, and my C is -2. Now, most of us cannot do this in our heads, including me. So I'm going to suggest you grab a calculator and get one for your group. So here comes the formula. Formula is x equals -b, so -3, plus or minus the square root, b squared, and I'm going to put my b in parentheses, minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a. Good morning. I think you're still sitting with Izzy and Joyce. All right. Here's my advice. Do not type the square root. Just type everything under the square root. That's called the discriminant, and we're going to talk about that on the back. But anyway, for now, just type what is under the square root. And not the root. Okay, I'm going to show you what that looks like. All right, so I did 3 squared minus 4 times -2. I got 41. And 41 is prime. It doesn't make a factor tree, so I can't simplify it. So I just have this as my answer. -3 plus or minus root 41 over 8. It has 2 different answers. One answer you get from the plus and one that you get from the minus. Let's look at 5. We're going to put 5 in standard form and identify A, B, and C, and then I'm going to give you a minute to work it out. Okay? Standard form, I have to get rid of the 5. What should I do? Yeah, I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. There's not a like term on the left side, so it's just going to show up as a -5. So I have x squared minus 2x minus 5 equals 0. All right, there's no number in front of my x squared, so I could put what number there? I heard 1. Anybody agreeing with 1?
I agree.
Okay. X squared is the same as 1x squared. So my A is 1, my B is -2, and my C is -5. So I want you to substitute your numbers into the quadratic formula, and then I want you to simplify it as much as you can. I'm going to see if I got the same as you. So I'm going to actually use some of the space over here. It ends up being a little bit of a longer problem. X equals -b, but it's already negative, so I saw some of you guys made it positive. That was good. Plus or minus square root. And then you need parentheses on your b to square it. Minus 4 times a times c. And then over 2a. All right, and then when I do -2 squared minus 4 times 1 times -5, I got 24. Anybody else get 24?
I got some. Me.
Okay, the number under the square root should be 24. That number is called the discriminant. We're going to talk about the discriminant more on the back, but just so you know, it has a name, the number under the square root. So we do get 2 plus or minus root 24 over 2. Now, why am I going to tell you that's not done?
You have to simplify the 24 squared, and you gotta cross out the 2's.
Okay, so you guys had 2 different ideas. Ahmed's idea was that we have to simplify the root 24. Osman's idea is that we're going to be canceling here. Now, we will be able to cancel if both of the terms on the top have a 2. But if they don't both have a 2, we won't be able to cancel. So let's start with Ahmed's idea, and then we'll see if we can follow up with Osman's idea. So for 24, we're going to do a factor tree. Oops, you can't see that at all. There we go. 4 times 6, 2 times 2, and 2 times 3. And so you can see I have a pair of 2's. I can take a 2 out to make 2 root 2 times 3 is 6. Okay, so because I have a pair of 2's, that comes out, and then I multiply the 2 times the 3 to get the 6 there. So this becomes 2 plus or minus 2 root 6 over 2. Now, can I follow up now with Osman's idea? Will both of those terms divide by 2? Can I divide 2 by 2? Yes. Can I divide 2 root 6 by 2? You can. All right, so my final answer will be 2 divided by 2 is 1 plus or minus 2 root 6 divided by 2 is root 6. And that one's done. Let's see if I can like connect the dots here. There we go. So that's the answer for number 5. All right, we're going to try number 6 right now. And then I'm actually going to leave number 7. Number 7 is worked out on the key, and you can look at that later. But for now, we're just going to do 6. So for 6, you're going to identify what is your A, what is your B, and what is your C. And feel free to use all the space you need, because I don't plan on doing 7 today. Okay, so your A, -4, your B is 12, and your C is -9. Check your work. Did you get those right? A, B, and C? Okay. All right. Now I'm going to substitute into the formula. Again, this is your formula right here. So for -B, I'm going to put -12. X equals -12 plus or minus square root. Parentheses 12 squared minus 4 times -4 times -9 over 2a. Now, this time, the part underneath the square root gave you what number? Okay, Jeffrey got 0. Did anybody else get 0 underneath the square root? Yes. Okay, so if you put this in your calculator, AB. If you put this in your calculator, 12 squared minus 4 times -4 times -9, you should get 0 as your discriminant. And so we get x equals -12 plus or minus root 0 over -8. What's the square root of 0? 0. When I have -12 plus 0, what do I get? Just -12. How about -12 minus 0? -12. So when my discriminant is 0, notice that I get the same answer with the plus or the minus, so I actually only have one answer this time. They both just give me -12. And then when I divide this, I get 1.5. And I just have one answer. What questions do you guys have on that? All right, take a 30 seconds, make sure you got it, and then turn the page. We're going to talk a little bit more about the discriminant quickly. Yes. Okay, raise your hand if you're still trying to get this. I see a couple people writing. I'm going to give you another 15 seconds. All right, let's turn the page. The discriminant. The discriminant will tell you what kinds of solutions you have. Notice in that last problem, our discriminant was 0, and that was when we only had one solution. The discriminant is this part underneath the square root. It is b squared minus 4ac. Okay? Notice that when you find the discriminant, you do not put a square root on it. The discriminant is the part under the square root, just b squared minus 4ac. When the discriminant is 0, then we just found that we only have one real solution. The solutions show up on the x-axis. They show up as intercepts from the parabola. Remember that a quadratic equation makes a parabola? So when you graph it, one solution would be at the vertex. So it could look like this. That's your one solution right there. Or it could be upside down. So your one solution could be right there. Okay? If you only have one solution, you only have one x-intercept. When the value of the discriminant is positive, you're going to have two real solutions. And those are the other problems that we did on the front. I'm going to turn back for just 1 sec. Okay, notice here, the discriminant was positive 41. We had two solutions. One was with the plus and one was with the minus. Over here, again, we had a positive discriminant, 24, and we had two solutions. One's with a plus and one's with a minus. Okay, so when the discriminant is positive, you have two real solutions, and you will have two x-intercepts, and it could look like this. There's your two solutions here and here, or it could look like this. Now, something that we didn't have on the front, we didn't have an example of a negative discriminant. Negative. When the discriminant is negative, then you're going to end up with the square root of a negative number. And what do you get when you have the square root of a negative number? I, right? When you have an I in your answer, the I is an imaginary number, but altogether that's called a complex number. So when you have a negative discriminant, you're going to have two complex solutions. Now let me ask you this. Where on your number line is I? Think about the number line. Negative 10, negative 9, negative 8. It goes up to 0. Then it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where on the number line would I be? It's a good guess, because I squared is negative 1, right? So I squared is negative 1, but I itself is not real, so it's not on the real number line. So when you have complex solutions, they do not cross the x-axis. So a complex solutions would be like this. See how it doesn't cross the x-axis? Or it could be like this. All right, but it's not going to cross the x-axis. And so you have no x-intercepts. All right, so in these problems, it doesn't say to solve. It just says find the value of the discriminant. We're not solving. Solving, you need the whole equation. But if it asks you about the discriminant, you're just going to use b squared minus 4ac. You still need to be in standard form, though. Okay, so let's look at the first one. Am I in standard form? One side 0, right? So I can say A is 2, B is 1, and C is 5. B squared minus 4ac would be 1 squared minus 4 times 2 times 5. It's going to be 1 minus 40, which is negative 39. So if my discriminant is negative, what kinds of solutions do I have? Are they real or complex? They're complex. And how many complex solutions do I have? 2. So I'm going to write down 2 complex solutions. Okay, I want you guys to put 9 in standard form by subtracting the 3. And then I would like you to find the discriminant and tell me how many solutions you have, and do the same thing for 10. Mm-hmm. All right, if you finished 9, you should have moved on to 10. For this one, I'm going to do b squared minus 4 times a times c. And I got 40. So remember, this should be a minus sign. That should be a negative sign. It basically gives you 4 plus 36, which is 40. And so because it's positive, I have 2 real solutions. All right, we'll do 10 together if you haven't already done it. So in 10, this is my A, my B, and my C. So b squared minus 4ac. All right, so negative 6 squared is 36. 4 times 9 times 1 is 36. So 36 minus 36 gives me a discriminant of 0. When your discriminant is 0, remember the plus and the minus? They do the same thing. Plus 0 and minus 0 gives you the same thing. So you just have one real solution.
I have a question.
Yes.
On the first one, how'd you get 1 and minus 40 on the other side?
This one here?
Yeah.
So b squared is 1 squared, so that's 1. 4 times 2 is 8, and 8 times 5 is 40. So I just kind of did this, the square of this, and then I multiplied this. You could do it all in one step, though. If you put in your calculator, you can do 1 squared minus 4 times 3 times 5 and still get negative 39. So you don't have to show a step. Any other questions on 8, 9, 10? All right, we're going to do one of the word problems right now, and if you decide to do the other one, there is a key that you can check. But let's look at the one about the ball shot from the cannon. So quadratic equations are useful in real life, and you can use the quadratic formula. But usually when you use the quadratic formula, getting a decimal approximation, which is approximately the right answer, is going to be more useful to you than getting an answer that is exactly right with a square root. So I'm going to end this problem a little differently, but it starts the same. We're finding the answer, so we have to use the whole formula, not the discriminant. And it says the ball is shot from a cannon with upwards velocity of 40 feet per second. That shows up in your formula. The equation to give the height of the ball at any time is h of t equals negative 16t squared plus 40t plus 1.5. How long did it take the ball to reach the ground? So we want to know when it reaches the ground, and that's going to be when the height is 0. So I'm putting a 0 for the height, and now it's already in standard form. So I'm going to use negative 16 for my A, 40 for my B, and 1.5 for my C. Now the formula is at the top of your paper, so you don't have to flip. This is the whole formula, even though the part that was the discriminant was this. We're using the whole formula. So negative B will be negative 40 plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 times a times c over 2a. All right, so I'm going to suggest that we put this whole thing in our calculator at once, but in order to do that, you need to hold the top together with a set of parentheses, and you need to hold the bottom together with a set of parentheses. And this is going to be really good practice for you to do this. If you just watch me type on my calculator, that is not good practice. You're not going to put the x equals in the calculator. The first thing you type is going to be this parentheses right here. Okay? So starting with the parentheses, negative 40. You cannot type plus or minus in your calculator, so you do it once with plus, and then you do it once with minus. Okay? We are going to type the whole thing in to get an approximate value because the exact answer doesn't mean too much to us. When you do your Desmos today, though, you'll be doing it more like the front. All right, let me pull the calculator back up. I'm going to make it large. Okay, I need parentheses and then negative 40. I'm going to do the plus first, and then I need square root. So that's second x squared gets you the square root. In parentheses, I'm going to do 40 squared minus 4 times negative 16 times 1.5. Now I need to get out of the square root, so use the right button to get out of the square root and then close your parentheses. Now we're not done, but I want to pause there for a second to make sure you got that. Parentheses negative 40 plus 40 squared, square root, 40 squared minus 4 times negative 16 times 1.5. Use the right arrow to get out of the square root and then close your parentheses. Is there anybody who needs help with the typing? All right, now for the fraction bar, just divide. That's your fraction bar. And then we need parentheses around 2 times negative 16. And then close your parentheses. So I'm going to enter that. I get a negative answer. I get negative 0.0, that's going to round to negative 0.037. Now, do you think it's going to be negative time for the ball to hit the ground? Does that make sense? No. So there's two answers, but in the real world context, often only one of them makes sense. So that's probably not the answer I want. To get back to that, if I press second, enter, it will take me back to what I just typed. Second, enter. And now I can go back and change my plus to a minus. Remember how it's plus or minus the square root? I'm going to go back and change my plus to a minus. That one right there. Change it to minus and press enter. This is my second answer, 2.54 seconds. This is the answer that makes more sense. 2.54 seconds. And so that's the one that I'm going to keep. All right, so I did record that on the video, and I'll be posting that video later today. So if you needed to see that more in depth, you'll be able to. But for the word problem, we wanted the answer to be a decimal approximation. I rounded that answer, so it is not exact. This is the reason why we don't always do this, because this answer is not exact, but it gives us a better idea of how long it's going to take for that ball to hit the ground than something with a square root would. Okay, so we might end up doing number 12 tomorrow or next class, but for now I'm going to leave that one be so that we have some time to start on your delta math. I also want to remind you that your quiz corrections are an assignment, so we have SS today. We can work on delta math and quiz corrections then as well.